The house is built in 1861, so it sort of goes through the entire history of the war. But for the end of the war, 1865, it was empty. The family had lost all its money, essentially, and then the slaves were freed. And then when Wilmington fell, and Wilmington being the most important port in the Civil War at that point, that was the Union headquarters. As soon as they arrived, they looked for the biggest house and picked that, and that's where the generals all hung out. Being from the South and from Wilmington and having plantations, they were trying to protect their way of life. But they were not in Wilmington, so the house was empty and actually looked after by slaves and then some others, people who stayed after they were emancipated. And then when the Union troops arrived, using it as a headquarters meant that John Bellamy had to petition President Andrew Johnson to get his house back. And he had to do that a couple of times in order to make that stick, because he had to renounce his Confederacy, I suppose you might put it that way, because he had been a huge supporter of the Confederacy and much of his family had fought on the Confederate side. So in that respect, he had to go back and sort of beg to get his house back and look for forgiveness, as it were, and a pardon, which he eventually got. And then they arrived back in late 1865 and took possession again, and then had to kind of rearrange their lives based on this new reality. In terms of who was here at the end of the Civil War and the finality of that war, the Bellamy is sort of a pivotal spot for it. So we interpret that when we give tours and that kind of thing as well. So I think coming to see it is obviously very important, because then you get an example, maybe just a little slice of what life was like right then at that moment in time.